Hi, this is Dr. Justina Agnieszka. This is the continuation of lectures on verbal self-defense and representation of groups, vulnerability groups, that's how it's called, that not necessarily participate because of fear of being punished or ostracized socially in circles from which they cannot be separated from because of personal attachments, personal interests and families, as well as a presentation of groups as person that is indicated or hired as such, which is usually second step after initiation of personal training, and the estimate of those dangers and or remediation of persons who are from the area, which those videos are also for. They are not only for Texas, they are for all of the states. However, because that person in Texas expressed such an interest, I am making them feeling entitled to do so, and because it was asked. Now, the many techniques that enable person from being falsely accused to do to that person harm in disproportionate way, impede from expression of self-expression and self-representation, are right now promoted in many areas, hopefully because of these videos. If you see those videos, teach others and practice. How do we practice? Divide persons in couples or small groups and create such situations that give possibility of having distance to them as opposed to personal one. So do not start with practicing with conflictive persons and areas that have what I denominated past hurt pain index. So the person or self, because of injuries ignored or dismissed done in the past, or being perpetuated, used to discriminate, are actually in a emotional expressiveness of self presented as a happiness when a harm to that group is visible or that person. Second one, anger when that person is disrespectful or speaks down to that person. Suspiciousness when personal or familiarizing tone is assumed, and also an impossible to control, apart from happiness from harm visible, instinct to actually in some cases attack first, and in some cases attack when buzzwords or buzz things are presented. When you feel that you have to deal with such persons or persons who present the characteristics of such persons, prior to resolution of that past trauma by exposure of persons who have these characteristics, you have to have an awareness of self to not to get in trouble. So when approached and you perceive buzzwords, one of the buzzwords, especially when African Americans, because I met many who were by implication implied in crimes they didn't commit, or disproportionately persecuted, pursued by corrupted authorities, especially in small towns, or in larger towns by larger groups. So when approached in a pseudo-righteous way, and a person says, for instance, those are buzzwords, is there any way we can talk to you, especially in plural, that is associated with threat, derived also from Soviet Union, in which a person is isolated and harmed, and that is presented as being opponent to goodness to others, and person is left alone. That is, in my personal experience, best to ignore in silence, as if you were read rights, also when done by corrupted police. So instead of fighting or saying sure, waiting for that whole thing to elaborate, say, I am very sorry, but I have to go. Or deviate the topic if possible. This is something that I've learned in law school. To, for example, in court, used distraction. Distractive phrase is as such, oh look how today it is sunny. So person verbally tries to approach for unknown purposes and seems to be declaring need for you to assume a role of an inferior in situation where that posed in the past risk of imprisonment, risk of rumors or presenting false accusations to demean and impede, for instance, employment, impede work, impede housing, access to social groups, and or appropriate to the education and level of that person's behavior, a, places and groups. So again, distraction is, for instance, a person falsely accuses or tries to approach with much in the past to success rate in conceit of actual good deeds, to promote persons who have reputation and did bad deeds, and target persons who did not commit those, to impede system of justice especially, and approaches to use you. And so when person approaches as such, for instance, you're having a drink or coffee, or you're I don't know, in some place where elevating hand suddenly, for instance, to wave, is presented as an attack. Remember, and you have, for instance, I don't know, you wanted to scratch your head, okay, and a person approaches to make an arrest, call mental services, or immediately starts to attack. Then the approach is to say, no, in non-involvement, I do not know what you're talking about, I don't speak the language, if you have such chance, or also remove self by a distractor, for instance, look, a bird, and then escape. If presented with authorities and enforcement, you cannot do so. And second maneuver is to state clearly first, last name, education, and state in plain language, I am being assaulted, help, in anywhere in the world, including in the United States. Repeat so, because if nothing else, there will be social change towards reduction of corruption. And so those are two steps. First one, if possible, to evade being attacked or harmed, make sure that approached on in the past proven to pose disguising of other people's with higher in the area reputation crimes, using you based on associated characteristics to to misrepresent convicts or persons who never were presented to the system of justice, say, I don't know what you are talking about, or I am very sorry, I do not want to answer any questions and I have such right, or I am very sorry, I am not going to remove myself from the area to an isolated place to interact with you. And then stand up and seek for either being alone or being supported by whoever it is that it is possible to give you such support. Second circumstance, if you are contrasted and you met with corrupted authorities, and based on false premises, intentionally usually, to disguise other person's crimes with reputation, you are being at risk of being attacked, pressed to the ground, or killed. State in plain language first and last name, function, and scream, I am being assaulted, help. And then, if possible, also place such phone calls and information to others. That is also verbal self-defense and assurance that you've done everything that is possible to defend self in situations of that I've observed for African Americans, being accused of non-possession of documents, while non-assistance in retrieval of such. A person was imprisoned and child removed from custody of that person because that person's wallet was stolen and was driving on a highway in a remote area of one of those central states. Second, for about 3 days, that person was removed, an African American male. Second case was a person who was accused of a disturbance to the peace when person actually was just using a bench to rest in a public organization that was a person of Native American origins. And person was persecuted and humiliated despite the age and status of the elder to remove self from that area immediately. That is also discrimination. And the attitude when threatened is to ask in plain language, stop lying and misrepresenting myself. That's one. Secondly, pay due respect to me, because this is a public place and you do not have monopoly, for instance, on public bench or an area around. Also, I am customer and I have rights without being disruptive and to not to be forced to be perceived as such. These are phrases that with time generate a message: I am to be reckoned with, whoever or wherever you are. Another verbal self-defense consists of silence. When attacked, place headphones or refuse to respond. Remember, when attacked, do not impede normal communication. It has to be when you are approached and you are accused of, with intention to harm, something that benefits groups that are considered groups of majority or interest, or person of questionable in reality reputation, that is backed up on false premises at your expense. And that is one. Second one is pushing back, which was in the prior videos. Third one is distraction, used in courts, saying, oh, look, and changing the topic. Also, you can use something personal. For instance, look how nice your t-shirt today looks, so that person removes the attention from being abusing you verbally and accusing. Never try in accusatory way to point out you are doing the same, because that will bring from that person sometimes physical attack. What you can do is state all of other cases and pursue group lawsuit or such petition, which I've done also at UT Houston for minorities, especially persons from Arabic countries and African countries. Go from person to person, email, send messages and say, you present the same as I problem, or problem the same as others of discrimination, and you have been feared or intimidated into by omission of lawyers of your representation promoting group of interest, and you have right to take an action to become visible. And that is then in form of petition and spreading of knowledge, appropriate maneuver to state, I am disproportionately misjudged, or I am being framed into non-intention of doing harm, or framed into such perception, into being observed or ostracized because of other persons' disproportionate intentional crime that are being disguised by these persons in power. And so then approach these persons, learn about pain index, what pushed those persons to act in such way, and form in a group of that person a role of facilitator, so that persons can take civic or legal action, petition, skipping if law is infringed, that's how it's called, skipping that and going straight for tribunals of human rights or organization of nature that have a representation in action of these persons and initiative delegated to subgroups and promoted towards social justice. I hope that it is clear and understood.